Welcome to this deep dive. And, if you're a regular listener, you already know our usual routine.
Right, we usually take a massive stack of sources.
Yeah, exactly. Like thick research papers or dense sociological data sets or just a mountain of historical articles. And we try to extract the most critical insights for you.
But today is, it's entirely different.
It really is. Today's mission is, well, we're exploring this incredibly brief, almost microscopic source, but it packs just a massive philosophical punch.
It does. Our goal today is to really slow down and dissect the profound psychological weight of it.
A perspective shift.
Exactly, the perspective shift and the emotional implications contained in literally just one sentence.
Right. So I'm actually going to read the entirety of the provided text for you right up front.
Right.
That way you have the exact phrasing locked in your mind for the rest of this conversation.
Good idea.
Okay, here it is. It's an excerpt titled The Gaze of Future Self. And it's just 13 words. Quote, "Your future is watching you right now. Make it proud."
13 words.
That's it. Okay, so let's unpack this because usually when we think about time travel, we picture like a DeLorean.
Right, or some messy sci-fi paradox.
Yeah, exactly. Where stepping on a butterfly in the Jurassic period changes the whole modern timeline or something. It's almost always framed as this external adventure.
You physically go back to fix a mistake.
Right, or you journey forward to see if the flying cars ever finally arrive. It's a physical movement across a landscape of time. But this quote, it completely flips that entire script.
It really does.
Yeah.
It introduces this startling idea that the time traveler isn't in a machine.
Right.
The time traveler is just you. And they aren't traveling, they were just, well, watching.
Watching, yeah.
Yeah.
It takes time travel out of the realm of blockbuster sci-fi and just turns it into this immediate psychological reality.
And it forces a complete rewiring of how you perceive your own life. Because we tend to treat time as like a spatial map that we're just slowly walking across.
Right.
But this text just removes the distance. So we need to slow down and really look at the underlying mechanics of this concept.
Yeah, how it reframes human behavior.
Exactly. By looking at how our brains actually perceive time, how we construct our identity, and what happens neurologically when we invite an imaginary, older version of ourselves into the room with us.
To understand the power of this text, we have to understand the nature of the observation.
Yes.
Which brings me to the title, The Gaze of Future Self. The word gaze does a lot of heavy lifting there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a passing glance is accidental, right? You glance at a clock and you immediately forget the time. But a gaze is heavy. It implies this continuous, unblinking, intentional observation.
And what's fascinating here is the cognitive mechanism that the concept of a gaze actually activates. In psychology, there's this well-documented phenomenon known as the Hawthorne effect.
Oh, right, where people change their behavior if they know they're being watched.
Exactly. The Hawthorne effect shows that human behavior changes significantly simply because an individual knows they are being observed.
It's like you can feel it.
You really can. When you feel a gaze upon you, your brain's self-awareness network just fully engages. You stop operating on autopilot.
Huh.
So the text conceptually splits you, the listener, into two distinct entities. There's the present actor making the decisions and the future observer taking notes.
Taking notes.
Yeah. And by internalizing this continuous gaze, you're utilizing a technique called self-distancing. You're effectively turning yourself into both the subject and the audience of your own life.
Okay, I see the utility in that, but I have a real pushback here.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's about the emotional texture of being watched. You say we change our behavior when we're observed, which is true, but how we change depends entirely on who is doing the looking.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Let me try an analogy. Is this future self an auditor, or are they a co-founder?
Oh, like that.
Because if my future self is an auditor, someone standing over my shoulder with a red pen, watching my every keystroke, just waiting to catch a mistake, that doesn't empower me.
No, it paralyzes you.
Exactly. I would completely freeze up under the weight of that scrutiny. But if the future self is a co-founder-like, someone who has equity in the project of my life, who relies on me doing my part today so we both succeed tomorrow, that feels entirely different.
That distinction between an auditor and a co-founder is critical, and it touches on the core psychology of accountability. I mean, an auditor represents external, punitive judgment.
Right. They just want to write you up.
Exactly. An auditor doesn't care about your growth. They only care about compliance.
Yeah.
But the future self cannot be an auditor because they are constructed entirely from your own internal material.
Are you?
Right. They suffer the consequences of your mistakes, but they also reap the rewards of your courage. When you conceptualize this observer as a co-founder, the scrutiny stops being a threat.
It becomes guidance.
Yes, a deeply invested form of guidance. The friction you feel when you imagine an auditor is really just the cognitive dissonance of realizing you can no longer hide your self-sabotaging habits from yourself.
Because the co-founder sees you eating the entire sleeve of cookies at midnight.
Right.
And they know exactly what that means for tomorrow's energy levels. You can't lie to someone who is literally going to inhabit your body in the morning.
No, you can't.
Which brings up a really fascinating structural element of this quote, the timeline. It says, your future is watching you right now.
The immediacy of it.
Exactly. The immediacy of right now completely crashes into our traditional concept of the future. We always talk about the future as a destination. You save money for the future.
You eat healthy to feel good in the future.
Right. It's this distant land you hope to eventually visit.
What the text is intentionally manipulating your perception of time to solve a very specific neurological glitch.
A glitch.
Yeah. In neuroscience, there are these really fascinating fMRI studies that look at how our brains process our present selves versus our future selves.
Okay.
When you think about yourself right now, a specific part of your brain, the medial prefrontal cortex, lights up.
Makes sense.
But when you are asked to think about your future self, that area actually dims. In fact, your brain activity looks almost identical to when you're thinking about a complete stranger.
Wait, really? Our brains literally treat our future selves like strangers we don't even know.
Essentially, yes. It's a phenomenon known as temporal discounting.
Temporal discounting.
Right. It's the reason we so easily saddle our future selves with credit card debt or leave them the chores we don't want to do today.
Or give them the health problems of our bad habits.
Exactly. We make poor long-term choices because the brain literally lacks an emotional connection to the person who will eventually have to deal with the fallout.
Because they're a stranger.
Right. But by stating that the future is watching right now, the text artificially forces the medial prefrontal cortex to stay active. It destroys that psychological distance.
Wow.
It yanks the future out of the abstract distance and drops it directly into your lap. It makes the stranger feel like a familiar, present companion.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Well, honestly, where I see a major practical dilemma with this whole philosophy.
Let's hear the dilemma.
If I am constantly aware that this older, future version of myself is actively watching me right now, doesn't that inherently ruin the present moment?
How do you mean?
Think about it. We are constantly told by wellness experts, meditation guides, psychologists, everyone says the key to mental health is mindfulness.
Living in the now.
Living entirely in the now. How can you be mindful? How can you just sit on a porch and enjoy a beautiful sunset or laugh until your ribs hurt at a stupid joke if you are constantly feeling the heavy days of the future, evaluating how productive your Tuesday evening is?
I see. Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see how this concept actually redefines mindfulness rather than ruining it.
Redefines it.
Yes, because we often confuse mindfulness with hedonic escapism, the pursuit of immediate, fleeting pleasure without any consequence.
Okay, fair.
True mindfulness, however, is about a deep awareness of the present, and that awareness shouldn't require you to be blind to reality.
Right.
In psychology, there is a concept called construal level theory.
Construal level theory.
Yes. It describes how we think about things depending on their psychological distance. And what this text does is merge low-level construal, which is the concrete, immediate action of the present, with high-level construal.
Which is the future.
Exactly, the abstract meaning and long-term values of the future.
So you're saying it elevates the sunset rather than ruining it.
It bridges the gap between short-term impulses and long-term consequences. I mean, if you're watching a sunset and you are truly present, your future self is likely watching with deep appreciation.
Thrilled that you took a moment to rest.
Exactly. Thrilled that you experienced beauty. The gaze of the future does not demand constant grinding capitalist productivity.
That's a huge relief.
It demands intentionality. The presence of the future only ruins the present moment if your present is filled with, mindless scrolling, numbing behaviors or actions that actively betray your own values.
It simply forces you to ask, Is this current experience building the person I want to become, or is it eroding them?
Exactly.
I really love the mechanics of that. Because it isn't about working 24/7, it's about doing whatever you're doing with total intention.
Yes.
If you're resting, you rest fully, knowing your future self needs that recovery. If you're working, you work deeply. The discomfort only really kicks in when you're operating in the gray area.
Right. Doing something you inherently know you shouldn't be doing.
But trying to ignore the consequence, the text doesn't let you ignore it anymore. It transitions you from the passive state of being observed into this ultimate demand. The final 3 words of the quote, make it proud.
That shift from observation to directive is the necessary resolution to the psychological tension the quote just built. Because if you've successfully internalized the idea that you are being continuously watched by your future self, well, the natural human response is to seek a framework for how to act under that scrutiny.
What are the rules?
Exactly. And the text supplies an evaluative metric. You must earn its pride.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's zero in on the specific emotional metric of the word proud, because it's a deeply loaded term.
Very much so.
Usually we strive to make our parents proud, or like a mentor who took a chance on us. When you substitute the future self into that mentor role, you become your own ultimate judge.
You do?
I can see how that bypasses the need for external validation, but doesn't it also create a closed loop that could become this impossible, exhausting standard?
How so?
Well, if I'm the only one I have to please and I know all my own flaws and all my own potentials, won't I just constantly move the goalposts on myself?
This raises a really important question about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and frankly, how we actually define pride. Notice the specific language the source material uses, or rather, the language it avoids. It does not say, make it rich.
Yeah.
It doesn't say, make it famous, or make it comfortable, or make it invincible. It explicitly asks for pride.
Pride.
In psychological terms, authentic pride is a self-conscious emotion tied to intrinsic value alignment, whereas hubris, or the desire for fame, is tied to external validation.
Oh, wow. That distinction changes everything, because you can become incredibly wealthy and be deeply ashamed of the ruthless things you did to acquire that wealth.
Exactly. The metric of pride completely changes the algorithm of decision-making.
Right.
Because if the directive was, make it comfortable, well, you would just choose the path of least resistance every single time.
You'd avoid all risk, vulnerability, and struggle.
Right. But human beings rarely feel authentic pride from taking the easy way out. We feel proud when we demonstrate courage in the face of fear. We feel proud when we act with integrity, especially when it costs us social standing or financial gain. We feel proud when we endure necessary hardship to achieve a meaningful, value-driven goal.
So by setting pride as the solitary metric, the text suggests that the future self is looking for the present self to prioritize character over outcomes.
Character over outcomes.
Exactly. That is a massive relief, honestly, because you can't always control the outcome.
Wow, you can. Yes.
You can start a business, you can work incredibly hard, make all the right ethical choices, treat your employees well, and a sudden global economic shift could still bankrupt you.
Absolutely.
If the standard of the gaze was make it successful, your future self would look back at you as a failure. But if the metric is make it proud, your future self can look back at the wreckage of that business and say, I saw how hard you fought.
I saw the honesty you maintained when everything was collapsing.
I'm so proud of the resilience you showed.
It separates your worth from your circumstances. That exhausting standard you mentioned earlier, it only exists if you conflate pride with perfection.
And perfection is impossible.
Perfection is a sterile, impossible goal. Authentic pride is messy. It requires struggle, it requires effort, and a relentless adherence to personal principles despite the odds.
It's the ultimate exercise in self-reliance.
It is. You are no longer living for the approval of society or your peers or, a social media algorithm. By forcing you to act for the approval of your future self, you're building an alliance across time.
You and your future self become a synchronized team.
Working toward the exact same vision of a well-lived life.
It really cuts through the noise of daily life, doesn't it? If you're scrolling online, seeing what everyone else is doing, it is so easy to feel the pressure to change your career or buy a different house or adopt a new aesthetic just to impress strangers.
Strangers who don't actually care about you.
Right, and those strangers are completely insulated from the consequences of your choices. They don't have to live in your body, manage your bank account, or deal with your mental health 10 years from now.
Only your future self has to carry the actual weight of the choices you make today.
So, structurally, only the future self's opinion truly matters.
It is a radical simplification of priorities. I mean, we spent a lot of time today analyzing the mechanics of these 13 words,
We really have.
from the Hawthorne effect to the intentional gaze to the way right now combats temporal discounting by activating our neural connection to the future.
Activating that medial prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. And to how the metric of pride shifts us from extrinsic outcomes to intrinsic character building.
It completely reframes your relationship with time and your internal sense of self-worth. And I actually want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a moment.
Please do.
Because the most beautiful part of this entire deep dive isn't just the philosophy, it's your ultimate agency. The text says the future self is watching, but you have to remember that you are the one currently holding the pen.
You're writing the story.
You are writing the story in real time. The future self isn't some fixed, predetermined judge sitting in the clouds waiting to hand down a verdict. The power to construct the very entity that is watching you lies entirely in your choices today.
You are building the judge.
Piece by piece, action by action, the future self only gets its wisdom from the lessons you're willing to learn today.
That agency is the engine of the entire concept. And if we take that agency seriously, it leads to a final, slightly provocative thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Oh, I like provocative thoughts.
We've spent this entire time exploring how the present serves the future.
Right.
But if your future self is actively watching your present self right now, evaluating, guiding, and rooting for you as a co-founder,
Yeah.
what happens to your past?
To the past. Wow, we haven't even looked in that direction yet.
Consider the geometry of this timeline. To your past self, you are the future self.
Oh, wow.
They were the ones being watched, and you are the one doing the gazing.
That's profound.
So does your present act of making choices that build pride have a retroactive power? When you finally stand up for yourself, or break a generational bad habit, or achieve a hard-won goal, does that present action have the power to reach backward?
Can it heal?
Can it heal, forgive, or finally bring peace to the younger version of you who is stumbling in the dark, making mistakes, but desperately trying to build the you of today?
I love that.
If the future can cast a gaze of accountability back onto the present, then the present can certainly cast a gaze of profound grace back onto the past.
Validating all the pain, the confusion, and the effort it took to get you to this exact moment.
Exactly.
The idea that by making the future proud, you are simultaneously healing the past. It turns time from a one-way street of anxiety into a continuous, unbroken loop of grace and purpose.
It's beautiful.
It really is. We started this deep dive talking about a time machine, you know, the classic sci-fi trope of stepping into a machine to physically fix a broken timeline.
But maybe looking in the mirror and realizing you're being watched by the person you're becoming is the only time machine we actually need.
That doesn't alter history, but it completely changes everything that happens next.